welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World with Nancy. And we're going to continue with our exercise, which is mostly to help me learn as I teach and possibly have a benefit for you as well, and by me answering some profound question or attempting to answer some profound question that could have a lot of significance for our lives. So I will pull out a question from the envelope, and I'll give myself, right now I think I have much less than 10 minutes to answer this question, but I will do my best to answer it within that time frame. So the question I have here is, why is there suffering in the world in the form of poverty, homelessness, abuse, hunger, tragedy, war within the world? Before I answer that question, I'm just going to take a minute to center myself, because I want the answer to come from the deepest part of me, that wise self that is within us all. I don't want it to be tainted by ego that always wants to sound so smart. This is not about me sounding smart or being right. It's just about me expressing the learning that I've gathered and obtained within me, or assimilated within me. So the question was, why does there appear to be so much suffering in the world in the form of poverty, illness, war, tragedy? I think we really need, first of all, to make the distinction between life circumstance and suffering. Life unfolds in front of us in a myriad of ways on a daily basis. Sometimes it's pleasurable and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's downright tragic, and other times it is downright joyous. That's life, offering challenges and offering us the opportunity to rest from those challenges by presenting something pleasurable. There is a difference between suffering and what life offers. So when we look out at war and at poverty, which are man-made creations, I must stress, in the sense that ego has created war, and ego has created this sense of poverty, and ego has created this sense of unfairness and inequality in the world. When we look out at that, we tend to call that suffering. What is happening in that experience is not necessarily suffering. People are responding and reacting to those circumstances, and their reaction is a form of suffering. Of course, we do not want to turn our backs on the suffering of other human beings in this world, because that is what we're here for, is to understand and evolve into an understanding of compassion and love and kindness. That's what I believe anyway. And we do not want to turn our back onto individuals who are suffering, but we do want to get to the root cause of suffering, the root cause of human pain. And we do need to make the distinction then between dukkha, which is what the Buddhists would call suffering, it's the Sanskrit word for suffering, and life circumstance. So what happens in life, as life unfolds in a natural way without the interference of man's ego, which causes the tragic experiences of war and poverty and inequality. When life offers us a challenge, we have a choice to lean into it and learn from it, or do what most of us have a tendency to do, is pull away and resist it. We're welcoming the pleasurable into our lives selectively, and we're pushing away the unpleasurable. So we may have a tendency to look at war and want to push it away and say it's wrong, bad, shouldn't be, which in a sense it is, because it's a man-made creation, right? It's not a natural experience of life. But when we push anything away from our experience, we are actually creating suffering. Instead of just allowing all the things that we experience in life to come into our experience and flow through our experience, we may be actually creating more suffering than is necessary. So let's get back to the question, why is there these things, circumstances happening in the world? Most of what we call suffering is our way of dealing with life. So fear creates war. Greed creates hunger for some, while too many of us get too much in the world. These are egoic things that lead to the experience of unfairness in amongst humanity. But the root cause of suffering is always the fact that we're forgetting that we are all connected and all one and all in this together, not separate entities in a fight for survival. So when we tap into the root cause of suffering, we also tap into this realization that we are all one. And when we can look out at others in our human world who appear to be suffering from the effects of war or violence or inequality, and feel compassion and love and kindness, and recognize not only that, but see ourselves within them, then we can transcend suffering and become peaceful and whatnot. So again, suffering is not what life is giving us, it's our response to it. Are we pushing it away? Are we closing off to it? Are we ignoring the suffering of other human beings in order to avoid this idea of suffering? Or are we embracing all life offers us as a learning challenge? And that learning is going to take us to the evolution, to the fact and the realization that we are all one, and what happens to my brother happens to me. And that leads to a full sense of compassion and love and a transcendence of this idea of suffering. I'm hoping that makes sense. And I'm hoping that what we can take from this question is that, yes, we want to put an end to these things, poverty and suffering and war and whatnot, because these are man-made creations that are actually an effect of suffering rather than a cause of suffering. And get to the root cause, which is this need for the realization that we are all one and we're all in this together, and that compassion and love and kindness for one another is a solution for everything. And it all begins with the individual mind, and with the war that goes on within ourselves, and the equality that goes on within our own minds. And once we do that, we will put an end to suffering, and we will understand what suffering is. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Hope that answers your question. And namaste.